That's a great thing to hypothesize as your aim.
A juxtaposition is not necessarily a criticism. I'm here going to present my own conclusions on the meaning of life, which I prefer to present as how to lead a meaningful life, with a juxtaposition to what Jordan Peterson has recently had to say on the topic. I open with an anecdote that'll probably be more appealing to fans of Jordan Peterson than it would be to any fans I might have. I went to a lecture at a university many years ago, and the speaker, who was a lifelong political dissident, atheist, and critic of the CIA, told a story from his youth when he was a true believer in the Catholic faith. As he said at the time, when he was a child, he wasn't just religious, he was also a snob. He didn't have a very high opinion of the local priest and local religious teachers he had access to. So he waited for his chance to go up to a senior Jesuit. Goes up to this more august religious scholar as a small child, and he asks him a question that he'd been preparing for some time. He asks him, quote, "How do I find God?" Close quote. And at this, the Jesuit is delighted and laughs, probably because it's a small, cute child asking this question, which is not what he's expecting that day. And he says something like, "Oh, my son, the fact that you are searching means that he has already found you." I think that the red flag here is, with every other sort of question, we're interested in definite answers. And yet when it comes to this question, when it comes to the question of the meaning of life, people of all religious backgrounds, people of all faiths are really quick to divert our attention towards some sort of notion that the way we ask the question is the most important part. The fact that we're questioning, the fact that we're searching, all of a sudden it becomes about the process and not the product. It becomes about the journey and not the destination. That's a real red flag that your religious leader may well just be a bullshit artist.
What you should be pursuing instead is, well, there's two things. You should be pursuing who you could be. That'd be the first thing. It's like, because you're not who you could be, and you know it. You have guilt and shame and regret, and you berate yourself for your lack of discipline and your procrastination and all your bad habits. You know perfectly well that you're not who you could be. And associated with that, you should be attempting to formulate some conception of the highest good that you can conceive of, that you can articulate. Part of that's definitely going to be to develop your character as much as possible, to dispense with those parts of you that are unworthy. You know, one of the things I've told my audience is, the young guys take to this a lot. I said, you should be the strongest person at your father's funeral, right? Well, that's something to aim for. It's a transition, a generational transition, and it means that, well, all the people around you are suffering because of their loss. They have someone to turn to who can illustrate by their behavior that the force of character is sufficient to move you beyond the catastrophe. And you need that. And that's a great thing to hypothesize as your aim. And happiness just evaporates as irrelevant in light of that sort of conceptualization. The human spirit fundamentally triumphs over death. And so that's optimism, you know, in the midst of the sorrow and the malevolence. We have the capacity, sorry.
Don't be sorry.
We have the capacity to transcend that. And there isn't anything more optimistic than that. And there's nothing in it that isn't good.
Some things are true on a small scale when dealing with pragmatic particulars, but then they can't be scaled up and generalized very well. Many people live their lives in a sort of loop of knowing, doing, gratification. They know what they got to do. Maybe they struggle to get motivated to do it. Then they do it, and then they feel some gratification because they've done the thing they knew they had to do. So this is a really simple loop, and it covers things like going to do the groceries and many mundane, particular pragmatic tasks in life. Knowing, doing, gratification. But is this the way to a meaningful life, or is this the meaning of life? No. It doesn't scale up very well. It doesn't generalize very well. It's not well suited to the more profound questions we get into when talking about the meaning of life. Keep in mind that most people commit to things without knowing them first. They commit to Marxism without having really read the works of Karl Marx yet. They commit to Buddhism while knowing remarkably little about Buddhist philosophy. Most professions and jobs that people commit to, they only find out the hard way afterward what the job really entails, what it's really like. As a child, you might have some notion of what it's like to be a nurse, and then you find out the hard way what a career in nursing really means, its advantages and disadvantages. You could be 20 years old and still not really understand what you're getting into when you sign up for nursing in general, or if you sign up for a very specific job or field within nursing. For me, I got involved with economics, thinking economics was going to be the philosophy of poverty. I get to the Department of Economics at the university. It's an unbelievably depressing department where everybody's just trying to get rich and go into real estate and work as a hedge fund manager, this kind of thing. That's not what I signed up for. When I was studying economics, I found it inspiring and interesting and rewarding. I had a sort of humanitarian set of goals and interests, and I ended up in the wrong department. So instead of a cycle of knowing, doing, and gratification, the way we live with the more profound decisions and the more profound unexpected events that unfold in our lives is a cycle of doing, doubting, and then doing again. It's a cycle of learning where we most often have to start off with action, with initiating action, even with undertaking a certain set of convictions that leads to action, this kind of thing. But then we have to continue to doubt those convictions or doubt those commitments, doubt those choices we're making as we go, so that it's a learning process. People ask me questions all the time, like, is it worthwhile for them to study Buddhist philosophy? Not is it worthwhile for everyone or anyone, but is it worthwhile for this particular person to start studying Buddhist philosophy? And then what would I recommend that they read, given their particular interests or what it is they're trying to do in their career or in academia or something? The hardest answer for people to live with is maybe. The hardest thing to do is to commit yourself to hundreds of hours of hard work, whether that's on Buddhist philosophy or learning the Chinese language or going to college to become a nurse and studying for that chemistry exam so you can go into nursing. The hardest thing is to commit yourself to the hard work, to the suffering that it entails, without knowing whether or not this is the right thing to do, without knowing whether or not it's a mistake you're going to regret later. And it's hardest of all to really be honest with yourself about that. It's hardest to keep that stage of doubt in the cycle of doing and doubting and doing again. It's very, very hard for most people to live with the knowledge, I don't really know. So if you undertake the study of Buddhist philosophy, you're starting off probably just with an awareness there is a bookshelf in the library that says Buddhist philosophy. That's really all you know. You know there's a category of books to be found in this. You don't know what its contents are going to entail, what it's going to mean. You may have some really misleading ideas from watching kung fu movies. You may have some ideas about yourself and how you're going to become a better person by studying this. Or you may have some use you're going to try to apply it to. Like maybe you think, I'm going to be better able to teach nonviolence or something by studying this philosophy, or I'm going to be able to do reconciliation, or I'm going to be able to help people in prisons deal with their rage. You may have all kinds of misconceptions, or expectations, or hopes, or dreams, whatever it is. But you're going to start by undertaking this labor in darkest ignorance. And you're inevitably going to suffer as you realize that the task you've undertaken is not the one that you had imagined it would be, that the outcomes can't be what you've anticipated. That's not even saying sometimes. I'm saying absolutely all the time when we're dealing with these questions that are really about the meaning of life and a meaningful life. If you're going to the grocery store to buy a tube of toothpaste, yeah, sure. That goes back to mode one. You know what you're going to do, you do it, then maybe you feel some gratification after the fact. The type of gratification you can get out of leading a meaningful life is instead the gratification of realizing how ignorant you were before and what it is you've learned, and then the sense in which you're better off now. The process of your own disillusionment is what lets you know that you're leading a meaningful life. And you may well say, well, what do you mean? I don't have any illusions? That's right. Whenever you start the process at any stage, you don't think you have illusions. You enroll in the study of economics at university. You decide to become a nurse. Let's be more specific. You decide to become an X-ray technician or a nutritionist, maybe something more specific than just nursing in general. And you don't think you have illusions about that profession or about that academic discipline. But you do. And in that process, if you have the detachment, if you have the self-discipline to stick to that kind of doubt, not to cling to some kind of belief, not to try to convince yourself that you know this is meaningful and you know you're going to be gratified by accomplishing this goal, if you can keep that kind of detachment and doubt ongoing, then you're going to recognize the degree of your own disillusionment when you find out how different these things really are from what it was you had expected, what it was you had dreamed about or yearned for. People want to resort to saying it's not about the answer, it's about continually asking the question. And I think that is ultimately dishonest. That really we have to challenge ourselves to move beyond these stereotype notions of, it's about the journey, not the destination, or it's just a methodological question of how to continually engage with the question of what is the meaning of life. No. Ultimately, what I have had is the luxury of making the wrong decisions and learning the right things from them and moving on. You can do that with Buddhist philosophy. You can't do that with a tattoo. You can't do that with heroin. You can't do that with cocaine, right? So the gravity of making the wrong choices, the gravity of misapprehending what will lead you to a meaningful life, the consequence of spending 5 years studying Buddhist philosophy in your spare time and then coming to the conclusion, you know what, this philosophy, it doesn't really answer the questions I thought it would answer, or maybe it doesn't help me in my career as a conflict resolution counselor, or doesn't have what I was hoping for. That's not going to harm you. But tragically, we live in a world where people all the time are making decisions, whether it's something as seemingly benign as getting addicted to playing video games, or something as seemingly wonderful as falling in love and getting married. People make decisions that have catastrophic long-term consequences for them. So when you're talking about a meaningful life, there's really a pretty limited range of legitimate questions that we can include in saying it's about the journey, not the destination, or it's about a mode of questioning more than it's about any specific answer. I have one friend who always wants to ask me, is it or is it not a good use of his time to go to the gym and lift weights for however many hours per week? Okay. The hardest answer for people to live with is, I don't know. The hardest answer is maybe. The hardest answer is you can't know until afterwards. When I was younger, I thought that vanity would have no place in my life when I was a grown-up. Like, why, what's the point? Why not just be fat and ugly when you're a middle-aged person? Who cares? Why would I care about vanity? Today, there's a sense in which vanity doesn't matter. I would never wear jewelry or a gold chain or anything. In some ways, I live a monastic life. But on the other hand, I do think health and fitness and strength justify a certain number of hours going to the gym. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm going to look back at this period of time in my life and think, wow, I made the wrong decision. I should have been pouring my time and effort into learning Chinese as a language and not into bench pressing over 100 kilograms. What was the point of doing that at 40 years old? Maybe I'm going to look back at that and think that's vanity, vanity of vanities. I have to live with that uncertainty. I have to live on the razor's edge of that kind of doubt with what I do intellectually and physically, with what I do in the pursuit of leading a meaningful life. If you undertake humanitarian work, what are the outcomes you're pursuing? Are you trying to make yourself a better person? Are you trying to make the poor better off? You're trying to help poor people with this humanitarian work you're doing? The hardest thing is to undertake humanitarian work, not with the faithful delusion that you're certain you're doing the right thing, but to undertake it at every step with a canny measure of detachment and self-doubt, with an awareness that the outcomes are beyond your control, that it's very likely you're going to have terrible regrets, and that when it's all over, you're going to look back and be able to measure the extent to which this was a meaningful part of your life, precisely because you were disillusioned by it, precisely because you didn't accomplish the things you set out to accomplish. Maybe you accomplished something else. Maybe at a minimum, you can say, I accomplished turning myself into the person that I now am.